According to the CDC, disability affects approximately 61 million Americans in the United States of America. I'm Srijin Ganta.
I'm Sanvi Cha.
I'm Dylan Nguyen. I'm Alice Shakhmatov, and this is Disability in the Workplace. Recently, activism has pushed for more rights for disabled people, especially equality in the workforce, and it is commonly agreed upon that the disabled do deserve to have this equality. Thus, we seek to answer the question of, has inequality for disabled workers been stagnant in the United States for the past decade? And our answer is, in the past decade, equality for disabled workers in the United States has not been improving. This can be seen based on the graph in the next slide. These statistics show that some of the jobs with the highest concentrations of workers who have a disability include janitors, as can be seen right here, alongside building cleaners, and also cashiers. Not only do these jobs typically pay lower wages, as can be seen in the comparison in salaries between the two groups of people with a disability and people with no disabilities, where people with a disability are colored dark green and disability are light green. But people with a disability also tend to earn less money than people with no disability. This is one of the broader examples of the inequalities workers face in regards to jobs and employment. Another example of stagnation and inequality can be viewed via disability gaps in unemployment throughout a 4-year time period, as can be seen in this graph, where it lasts from 2009 to 2012. And it can clearly be inferred that this trend continued for the 4 years that the data was recorded for. This ties into the quote which follows, where the statement made by the Bureau of Labor Statistics also confirms that there is a clear lack of effort put in by corporations and employers to hire more disabled people and pay them better.
Alright, numerous factors of disability makes it quite difficult to achieve equality in terms of accommodation. The 6 percentile ranges that you can see above are the types of functional disability. The most common, mobility, is also the most commonly accommodated for. The ADA states that they require reasonable modifications of a workplace to give disabled workers the possibility to work as efficiently as normal workers. But these reasonable modifications are defined as having to benefit both the disabled and the normal worker. Because of this clause, the requirement cannot go far to accommodate other disability types. As the graph shows, even though disability allows the person to work, hence the functional, the more uncommon disabilities require accommodations that cannot be included in the ADA's definition of reasonable accommodations. Now, while the previous slide was about a statistic of a category of disability, this infographic is about race, health, and physical health affects disability. As the graph here shows, race and ethnicity have a direct effect on disability, as some of the races or ethnicities have a higher percentage while others don't. Here, this is just another factor that makes disability so much harder to predict. Here below, the bar graph shows how physical health relates to disability, as most of the disabled people on the graph are either obese or smoke. To take into account the health of the disabled person is vital to providing a safe and equal workplace.
The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990 by the U.S. Congress due to these activisms, as Alistair stated earlier. And it stated that employers could no longer discriminate against disabled people for hiring and for pay reasons. However, it still happens, as Alistair pointed out. It also required accessibility regulations in the workplace as well as in public areas. Pictured here is one of these regulations specifically for the wheelchair disability or immobility. As you can see, there's a minimum hallway width which the public building must have in order for the person with the wheelchair to fit through, as well as cross traffic to head back. However, despite these regulations and accessibility accommodations, there is still inequality for disabled people, as pointed out by Alisher. Depicted here was a protest in 1990 before the passing of the ADA called the Capitol Crawl, in which many protesters climbed up the steps of the Capitol building who were disabled using basically only their hands in order to protest for the passing of the ADA. Shown here is a girl only 8 years old climbing the steps and participating in the protest, which shows the importance of the movement for disabled rights and for equality. This diagram is a step-by-step plan for the including of equality for disabled people. It starts off from accessibility, which is required in the ADA, and then it moves to usability and user diversity. However, in a study by Professor Roy McConkie, a researcher for the University of Ulster in Ireland, where he conducted a survey by local governments, most local governments are still only at the step of accessibility. Thus, it is important for governments to work towards usability and user diversity for their disabled citizens. And it is important to achieve this because, as stated by Anne Frank House, it would create for a very unpleasant society.
We propose two solutions to our problem. The first one is compensation of demonstrating expenses. This basically means compensating companies directly to hire disabled workers. In turn, this benefits the company as they get a monetarily value, and the disabled worker themselves as the disabled workers are being hired. And our second solution is a hiring quota. A hiring quota is expressed as a percentage in which the company's percentage of workers must be disabled. For example, this can be 10% of the company must have disabled workers, as this would be in proportion to other employees that are not disabled. However, we have to address that there are certain limitations to our two solutions. First off is the cost to the ADA and the government itself. First of all, compensating companies that hire disabled workers is expensive. It makes the government and the ADA pay more, and this uses taxpayers' money. Taxpayers may not be happy with this idea, which could cause civil unrest. Second, insufficient compensation. The compensation that may even be provided to companies may not be enough for them to be incentivized to hire disabled workers, which would lead to just an inefficient solution. However, there is also difficulties in accommodation. Some disabilities may not be accommodated. For example, extreme autism cannot be accommodated easily in a workplace and will be extremely difficult to accommodate. And then our fourth limitation goes with our second solution, the geographic and demographic spread of disabled workers themselves. Companies that are based in different locations across the US will not be able to hire disabled workers as easily as companies based in other locations. There is a difference in disabled workers across the country. Disabled workers are not located in one area, but they are spread out, and companies may not be able to have an easily accessible amount of disabled workers to hire to fulfill the hiring quota, which in turn can make companies be punished by the ADA or the government if they do not hire this certain amount of disabled people. And then last one, ineligible jobs. Some companies, such as construction companies, people with mobility disabilities are not going to be able to work in a construction company. That is another limitation. So some companies will be excluded, and these jobs will not be suited for disabled people. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come together, there you go. V, we'll start with you and we'll go across the board there. Which of their three presentations had the greatest impact on you? And then why?
For me, Dylan's presentation had the biggest impact on me because his research about how the ADA and what policies they were making helped me understand how the medical labels help impact the policies and the job requirements, as I understood more about how the policies were directed towards certain medical labels and directed and not directed to others.
Shujin, is there something that someone did research on that you didn't include, and then if so, why didn't you include it?
Dylan included an interesting point on that employers had a valid concern that disabled people were inefficient compared to regular workers. However, we did not include this in our presentation as this is a counterintuitive to our argument and it would undermine our presentation. So we decided to not include it.
It's a good reason not to. Dylan, if there was a fifth member of your team, what perspective could they have that would add to what you did?
If we were to have a fifth member, we would most likely have them explore deeper into the educational and training aspects for workers in order to evaluate what may cause this inequality or other factors that may include this.
Okay. And Alisher, tell me, describe one of the arguments or one of the research points that your teammates made that made you think differently about the research you did.
Srijan made an interesting point in his individual research report about employers acting differently in different companies based on the amount of funding they receive from taxpayers, and this results in different employers not being able to hire different disabled workers.
Okay. Cool. You guys are done.